Yo, what's going on, guys? In today's video I want to talk about the discussion that happened a few days ago on Torchlight Infinite livestream on Twitch, and the topic of the discussion was action RPGs as a whole, and obviously the main focus was Torchlight Infinite. And the special guest for this discussion was David Brevik, which, in case you don't know, is creator of Diablo and basically the whole action RPG genre. And right now he's a consulting producer for Torchlight Infinite. And the other participants were Rich Campbell, who is a Twitch streamer, also Riker and Ten, who are YouTubers, and we also had Jack, who is director of product for Torchlight Infinite, and Ian, the community manager. The whole discussion lasted for a little bit more than an hour, so in this video I want to give you the summary of all of the topics that they talked about and my opinion on them. So it's gonna be just me talking, so here in the background you can watch some Torchlight Infinite gameplay. So the first topic that they talked about was what do you look for in the action RPGs? And David Brevik answered with that for him the most important thing is just how the game feels when you play it. And to be honest, I couldn't agree more. Definitely when you're playing action RPG, you don't really care about the stories. Even the systems like crafting and so on come second. The most important thing is just how the game feels, because most of the time you're gonna just run through the maps, kill monsters and so on. So gameplay always comes first. And I do remember, for example, when I played Path of Exile a very long time ago when it launched, the game definitely didn't feel too great. There was a lot of desync happening. The game wasn't like super responsive and so on. So I actually didn't really play Path of Exile at the beginning that much. But in time, they actually improved it. And now, especially after the Legion League, they introduced animation canceling. Now the game definitely feels much smoother and much better to play. So even if game is bad at the beginning, it can always improve. And I definitely can say that, for example, Torchlight Infinite feels very nice to play. A game like Diablo 3, even Wolsen, which doesn't have too many good system and so on, it definitely still feels very nice to play. Then after some discussion, they also mentioned that it always feels nice that when you're playing an action RPG, you feel like you're cheating. So what they mean by that is somehow you maybe combined a legendary item with some talents or two legendary items together, and you figured out some different, some weird combination, and you just feel like cheating. Suddenly you're just obliterating the game, killing everything. And the question was towards the David Brevik. How do you predict these things, and do you always know all of these combinations, or sometimes players figure out some stuff that you don't think of? And he basically answered that yes, very often players figure out some stuff that they didn't think of, but it is always nice to see, and they try to not nerf them immediately, let the players have fun, and maybe eventually just balance them out so they are not too overpowered. But I can definitely agree, it always feels nice to just figure out some weird combination and yeah, just make the game feel like you're cheating. After that, Jack, director of product, mentioned what were 5 pillars they were looking at when they were creating Torchlight Infinite. And these were rich builds, challenging grinding, rewarding loot, in-depth crafting, and free trading. And I can definitely say they accomplished most of them. Rich builds, definitely you can create a lot of different builds, even though at the beginning it looked like most of the people just played Whirlwind or Minion builds. Definitely now when I look at the game, a lot of people are playing so many different builds, and builds that I didn't even think were possible to make. Challenging grinding, obviously it is gonna be different for everyone, but I can definitely say sometimes in this game grinding doesn't feel too challenging, because for example when you're doing time mark 7, for me right now it feels super easy, but when I move on to time mark 8 it actually feels too hard, so I just stick to time mark 7, and time mark 7 is very easy, and I don't feel too motivated to go to Time Arcade, so maybe there should be something in between. I don't know, it's just, I think sometimes things might be a bit too hard, maybe too easy, so I definitely would love to see a little bit more like in between stuff. Rewarding loot obviously is gonna be different for everyone. Some people will say game is too rewarding. Some people will say it's not enough or not rewarding enough. But I can definitely say something like Flame Elementium has a pretty nice drop rate. It's not like Divines or Exalts in Path of Exile that you're not gonna see them sometimes in a few hours of gameplay. You definitely are gonna see one drop from time to time, but it's not too common that you actually feel like, oh, you just dropped it and you don't really care. You actually feel excited when you drop it, but yeah, you don't drop it too often. Now crafting, I can definitely say most of the items that you're gonna wear are gonna be crafted or legendaries. So if they try to accomplish that people are actually gonna be crafting most of their gear, they definitely accomplished that. And free trading, obviously we have the auction house, so trading is definitely possible, even though I still think auction house needs a little bit of work. For example, the most important thing that is missing is sorting through by prices, because right now it's really hard to just find the cheapest items that you want to buy. Next topic of discussion was loot in action RPGs, and most importantly, how to make sure that loot feels rewarding and that when players play the game and there is a bunch of loot on the ground, it just doesn't feel like there is a bunch of garbage. So they pretty much agreed that right now the best thing for loot is loot filters. So Torchlight Infinite has built-in loot filters. Also, a lot of other action RPGs are including loot filters in the game, like Lost Epoch, and obviously Path of Exile has not built-in loot filters, but it supports a third-party tool for making the loot filters. And I can definitely agree that as of right now, I don't think there's gonna be a better way of making sure that players just see the loot that they want to see, because it is pretty much impossible for developers to just make sure people see on the ground that players want to see. Because, for example, someone might want to find a bunch of rare items because he just started playing the end game, he doesn't have a lot of materials, so he's just looking for items on the ground. But for example, when you're experienced player and you have already a lot of gear and stuff, you probably don't really expect to find anything good on the ground, so you're mostly just gonna pick up currency. And in terms of items, you're just gonna look for the item bases, so you're no longer gonna look for the rare items or magic items. You'll just find white items on the ground just so you can craft on them. And if designers, for example, would disable in the end game white items on the ground, it would make crafters not happy. And if you would disable rare items, well, obviously it would not make players that are just looking for good items happy. So loot filters is definitely a good answer, so that players can just customize what they want to see on the ground. And in Torchlight Infinite, also another good solution for it, and it's also in other action RPGs like Path of Exile and so on, is that players can personalize what they drop a little bit. So in Torchlight Infinite, you can do that thanks to the cards system. And in case you don't know what the card system is, let me just quickly explain it. Basically, some maps are affected by certain cards, and these cards can do various things to a map. For example, there is a card that increases the chance that you're gonna find the flame fuel, and there's another card that is gonna increase the chance for embers to drop. So if someone just wants to loot more embers, he can do maps with these cards, and if someone wants flame fuel, he's gonna farm maps with these cards. And you can also customize your deck, where you can choose which cards are gonna appear on your maps. So basically that's a way to make sure you're gonna loot more stuff that you actually want to drop. And for example, in Path of Exile, this is done with things like Scarab or Atlas passives, where you can basically choose what you want to specialize in. And these were basically the main topics about the gameplay they talked about. The last thing they were talking about is the monetization. And the main topic of discussion on monetization was the fact that Torchlight Infinite is both PC and mobile game, so it's trying to fit somewhere in between in terms of monetization. So for mobile games, most of them are free to play and people are used to being able to just pay for a lot of in-game stuff. And PC is basically opposite. People don't want to play for in-game stuff when they are playing them. So Jack mentioned that when they were designing Torchlight Infinite, they basically made a rule for themselves, which they called green line and red line. And what that basically means is that there is a green line that basically lets them make the game. Basically, they have to make enough money to make sure company is running and they just can continue make content for the game. So that's basically the line they cannot go below, because if they go below that, basically the game is gonna stop working. And then there is the red line, which is basically the opposite. They don't want to go over that line, where basically monetization gets in a way of having fun. And that's basically being able to buy things like currency. And for example, they also don't want PvP in the game ever, because if there is PvP in the game, if there is literally anything you can buy in the game, people just gonna feel bad when they go to PvP, and they are always gonna feel like they're losing because someone just bought something, even if that difference is like very small, like 5%, 10% or something. So for example, Rich Campbell mentioned that he's the player that whenever he plays any pay-to-win game like Genshin Impact or something like that, he pays thousands of dollars, and when he played Torchlight Infinite, he didn't feel like buying anything. He didn't even know that packed spirits exist. So system like that definitely is not in your face, and it just doesn't make you have less fun. So definitely it doesn't feel like it's super needed. I personally don't mind any of the other system in the game. Definitely Pact Spirit is something that let you have a little bit more power than other player, but it's also not super big thing. It's only lets you have like 10-20% more player power. And as of right now, I've watched a lot of YouTube channels and Twitch streams, and I actually haven't still seen a single person that have been like buying a lot of these packed spirits that helps you. Everyone just has fun playing the game without paying a lot for in-game stuff. And then the last topic, basically there was like a loose discussion on the game, and then they mentioned they might make a race in the future when they would play hardcore, and just to see how people can do in hardcore and play basically free to play, don't pay for anything. Can people actually complete the game in hardcore? And that would basically show that yes, in fact, you can just play through the game without paying for anything, and it doesn't really do that much. And for me personally, this is something that I actually plan to do anyway, so I'm happy that they are planning a race like that. I'm definitely gonna do some hardcore playthrough in the future. Even without that race, it's just something that I plan to do anyway. So that's basically it for this video. If you have any your opinions on action RPGs right now, and specifically Torchlight Infinite, make sure you leave it in the comment. But for me, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.